Welcome to Investing on Purpose, the show about making your money matter. On this show, you'll be introduced to emerging trends and entrepreneurs who are creating change through business. Join JP and I every week as we explore how to use our money to create an impact and make the world a better place. Now, on to the show. All right, JP.
Hi, this is JP Newman with Investing on Purpose. I'm here from northern Croatia today with a dear friend and someone I've been wanting to have on this podcast since the day I thought about doing this podcast, Xavier Helgesen. And Xavier, what a week it has been together.
It's been awesome, JP.
We have just got back from an incredible thought conference called Baby Bathwater in the northern Croatian islands. We are headed to Slovenia today, and it's just been an incredible time. Xavier, I met about 7 years ago, and something about Tom Bacon's story. We sat at, and 500 people, we sat in a room together, and basically what started out as just two strangers sitting down for a dinner has turned into a 7-year adventure of all kinds of things together, from Africa to Croatia. And most importantly, Xavier, you've really inspired me on thinking about social impact in business for profit. I think you've really shaped a lot of my own thoughts, and I know we've had endless discussions on the topic.
Yeah, well, I think it's been a co-creation.
Yeah.
You frankly taught me a lot about investing.
Well, good. Together we're doing great. And Xavier, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because I think you've kind of had this career of really bringing in a for-profit and sustainability. And I loved what you said to me the other day. We were driving. We've had a lot of hours to drive together about, I think a lot of people have it backwards. They're thinking about the social impact first, as opposed to thinking about actually the business first. And once your business is successful, you can layer on the social impact and kind of, because thematically, when I think about the companies that you've had, obviously, you were a precursor even Facebook, from Facebook to Better Time Books to ZOLA to your current enduring ventures. There definitely, that theme runs through your career, and you've been able to do it really successfully.
Yeah, like you said, I was thinking that you have to be an entrepreneur first, at least in the business side. I would even argue in the nonprofit side, and then pick your mission. I've seen a lot of people try to do it the other way, where they say, I'm passionate about literacy, and so I'm going to start a business that solves literacy.
Right.
And what I always tell people is it's really hard to make anything profitable and successful. It's really hard to start a car wash or a fast food restaurant or a clothing store or anything, right? So to start a complex business and then also to have it deliver on a social goal is really, really difficult. Yeah. And I think what is probably a better strategy is to find an unserved need in the market, and then bring your own intention, your own passions, your own care, and you'll be amazed how you can shape the service of that need, and infuse it with your vision for the better world you'd like to see. And I remember having this notion very distinctly before I'd done any of this when I was like 22, and I thought, okay, well, what do I want to do? I actually want to do something that's good for the world, but I love starting businesses. Like, for me, it wasn't hard to be an entrepreneur first, because I've been doing that since I was 12. It was the thing I knew how to do.
You're incredible.
Yeah.
Because you said you didn't really come from an entrepreneurial family. This is just something that's burned. In fact, if anything, your mom had just the opposite. You had incredibly intelligent, educated parents that weren't necessarily entrepreneurs, and you kind of observed that and said, I want to kind of, plus your own skills. I mean, part of it probably is just your own thing.
Yeah, no, I had a chip on my shoulder from the early days, which was I wanted to get out of small town Minnesota. And that motivates me to this day. That's why we're in the middle of the woods in Croatia. Yeah. I'm still running away, JP.
I'm not doing that. So, obviously, can you talk? I think Better World's kind of everything you're just describing. You kind of brought into Better World, which was not even a category, a market. If I recollect, what was it? $70 million at its peak. It hit about 70 million. And
it hit about 70 million in revenue. So Better World Books, by the numbers, has sold over $1 billion of books on the internet since it was founded.
Incredible.
Which is pretty wild. And we founded it in 2002. So I graduated from college in 2001 in the midst of the big .com crash. And so all my skills, building websites, writing software code, I couldn't find a job. I couldn't even find a temp job.
Yeah.
Uh,
Perfect time.
yeah, perfect time. And so what the short story of Better World Books is, because I didn't have a job, my co-founder in the company and I had been left with all the stuff in the college apartment that we shared with a bunch of other guys. And they had all gone to their banking jobs and their consulting jobs, and they left their textbooks and a bunch of other things, couches and everything else. And we said, great, we'll take that. We'll sell it off for you. And so we put the textbooks on the internet in the middle of the summer. It wasn't even college season. And they just started flying. They just started, $60, $80, $100.
How'd you post on it? Like on a,
We posted them on half.com,
wow.
which is now owned by eBay.
Wow.
But it was that was before you could post things for sale on Amazon, which sounds a little crazy, but at the time there were no third-party sellers on Amazon.
Makes sense.
And so we thought about this. We saw this huge demand even for old textbooks. We had no idea where one would go to get a bunch of old textbooks, because we didn't know like what you would pay for them if you tried to buy them from students, and we didn't have any money to buy them from students anyway. So we're like, okay, what can we do? And the idea hit of a book drive, and that you could run a book drive with a charity, and you could collect the books, and then you would sell the ones you could sell on the internet. And if it all worked, you'd actually raise money for the charity, have a viable business because the charity could pay you to sell books. And then you'd also have some books you could donate that for whatever reason you couldn't sell. And so that idea, it sounded a little crazy, and we just took it and did it, and it worked better than I ever would have imagined.
Wow.
And so, I went from 22 and unemployed to, I think when I was 25, we were doing $10 million in sales and growing, over 50% a year, and we had bootstrapped it. So we actually hadn't taken any investment to do that.
Wow.
Just by running more book drives.
Incredible. So it's kind of what you were talking about with like how, again, the business idea came first.
The unmet need, right? Which is cheap textbooks.
Right.
Right. And so that was the unmet need, and it was the entrepreneurial energy. How do I get cheap textbooks?
Yeah.
That ended up bringing me to a business that has raised like $25 million for charity, that has donated countless millions of books. There's actually a counter on the Better World Books website where you can see the number.
Wow.
I don't even know what it is now, but
Incredible.
yeah.
That is just amazing. I mean, I think that so many people think about the world as like this bottom line. It's like you can't have both. And I know that a lot of this whole birth of this podcast is really like creative thinking can take you really quite far in being a profitable, sustainable company and having that double bottom line. And again, you could have just stopped at one, but you kind of continued on from there, which Better World Books lives today. It's incredible, the model.
Yeah.
I think at one time, weren't you like number 2 behind Amazon, I think, for total book sales in the...
Yeah, we had a moment, and we were one of the few... we were one of the few companies that actually has 1 million plus feedbacks on Amazon and eBay. We actually had that a long time ago.
Is that right?
Yeah. So we were one of the first pure play Amazon third-party merchants. So not long after Amazon opened up its website, we basically rode right on the back of that. And we were selling all our books on there. Today, most people actually come to betterworldbooks.com. So we have actually our own website where more of the money goes to charity, makes the business more sustainable. And best of all, the business is actually owned by a nonprofit. So our exit was to the Internet Archive, which is one of the most interesting nonprofits in the world. And their goal is to build the library of everything humanity has ever written and make it digitally accessible for free. So
incredible. But that wasn't enough for you. Of course, you had to continue on. So somehow, tell me, actually, I'm really curious. I was lucky enough on ZOLA, what followed?
Yeah, so ZOLA was what followed.
Which, by the way, before you jump into ZOLA, which became about recreating solar power and reliable power in Africa, I got to actually visit your offices in Tanzania 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And it was the most incredible experience to see a staff of 100 plus people in the field offices, and you actually taking me out. But maybe you can talk a bit about that. First of all, before you tell me about the business, how did you go from books, which, by the way, that alone, if you would have done that one thing on this planet, would have just been awesome enough as far as impact. How did solar in Africa come into your mindset?
Oh man. Well, it was I once talked to a recruiter, and they were telling me how, like, if a candidate has to like change industries or change job titles, like doing any one of those things has a very high rate of failure. So they try to find the same person from the same industry with the same job title, in the same location.
Yeah.
And I did none of those three. So I basically created the highest possible risk of failure for myself by moving to East Africa and trying to do hardware. So so the genesis of this was I got a year off to do not nothing, but I was I was getting my MBA, which was like, it was some work, but I had plenty of space.
At Oxford.
At
right?
Oxford.
Yeah.
And so the Skoll Foundation has a scholarship for social entrepreneurs. So it was a great arrangement for me. They covered my tuition and gave me a stipend to live there. And their goal is like, hey, come to Oxford, get exposed to a bunch of ideas, and then go do something good in the world. So speakers came in all year long, and a few of them came in and said, hey, this renewable energy thing in Africa is going to be a big deal. Like, the grid doesn't work very well here. Tons of people need electricity. And I felt like, wow, this is one of those rare opportunities where something's going to transform, and it's sort of obvious, and you can go and it can really help a bunch of people. And by that point, obviously, I definitely identified as a social entrepreneur. I definitely wanted to find something that was very directly impactful.
Yeah. But once again, following your pattern of logic,
yeah,
you saw the need first. It's like you
Yes.
described the story. You talk about the need first. You saw an emerging market, essentially,
Yeah.
of consumers who needed power. And then you saw the social impact kind of second. But that really sounds like that's what drove you.
Yeah, it really was. It was really exciting because it was, it's you think of customer pain, right? I talk to entrepreneurs a lot about, like, have you really found the customer's pain point?
Mhm.
Because they'll let you know when they have. And there's no bigger pain than not having electric light. Like, that's like
Yeah.
such an obvious pain point. And the solutions that people were using because they didn't have electric light, they'd have kerosene lamps, like dim kerosene lamps, where kids would have to sit, 1 foot away from them to have enough light to do their homework. And they'd just be inhaling the jet fuel fumes, which is what kerosene is.
Wow.
And so, yes, it's very motivating.
Plus a big market,
A
obviously.
huge market.
Yeah.
When we started in Tanzania, I think 12% of the country was electrified.
Wow, that little. I didn't realize that.
So 88% of the homes were a ready and willing market. And even the ones who were on the grid, it was quite unreliable. And so they were also very interested in, how can I generate my own power and use it? And so our innovation was to bring, the logic of prepaid mobile, so that you can pay in small increments at a time to bring it to the provision of solar in Africa. Because if you just tried to sell someone a solar and battery kit, even a relatively small one, the vast majority of people couldn't afford it. And up front, and even if they could, there's a risk of, okay, well, what if it doesn't work? Now I've lost all my money, and so we had to change the business model to, we install it for a minimal upfront cost, and then you pay as you go. And then if you pay reliably, you own it.
Incredible. How long would it take to own it?
About 3 years, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not too bad, honestly.
So as you're starting to describe this, Xavier, for me, I'm like, it sounds like such a big problem. I probably would have run away. I mean, there was something in you that was willing to take on something so big, and again, move to Africa essentially. And I know you also had offices in Amsterdam, if I remember as well. Wow. I mean, there's something in you, I guess, that's willing to kind of swing big at big opportunities and big problems.
Yeah, I get very motivated by them. It's sort of, I think we were talking in the car. I'm such an Elon Musk fanboy, and what I think a lot of people don't appreciate about him is I really take him at face value when he says he loves humanity, and like his motivation is like making the state of humanity better. And I think a lot of people look for cynical reasons why, oh no, he just wants to get really rich or powerful, because we're so used to being cynical.
Right.
And there are actually people out there, I would put myself among them, who love humanity and realize, like, I have, gifts and tools and networks that most people don't have. And so I should point that gun at, a big issue that is kind of systematic, and try to do my part to change it. And, so in a weird way, what I'm proudest of with our solar company isn't our own growth or profitability, although it serves over 1 million people today. It's actually, we kickstarted an industry.
Yeah, incredible.
And so we really brought, a ton of attention and ultimately a ton of capital to an array of great entrepreneurs and great companies working all over Africa, India.
And also, you're being humble because if I remember some of your backers, didn't you raise $100 million for this company?
No, more like 200 million.
So you raised $200 million for this company. You had, like, if I recollect, it was Tesla. I mean, you had some.
Yeah.
Who else was amongst your?
So here's kind of the cool things is that the founders of Microsoft, eBay, Apple, and obviously Tesla invested in the company.
Right.
So
I mean, that's not something just to kind of like that. That's a huge deal to get large corporations like that to fund a startup in Africa and start an industry. It's a super big deal. So I think, when you say you're humble, you have the networks and the gifts. The gifts, certainly, the network you developed from scratch. You were a guy doing lawnmower service in Minnesota, and you created these networks from scratch.
Yeah, I really did. I remember this. I heard this one quote from a very wealthy Italian guy, and they asked him, what would you do if you were penniless? What would you do if you had to completely start over? And he said, I would do whatever it took to get 500 euros. I'd buy a nice suit, and I'd go to where people are who make things happen, basically.
Wow.
And so, when you think about that, most of the networks I built have actually just been by showing up as somebody no one would know.
Yeah.
Like even with the success of Better World Books, like that was a very limited sphere of people who sort of knew who I was. And, we got a little press and stuff, but I would show up. I got into the TED Global Conference in 2009, for example, and I met some of the most important people to the success of ZOLA, the solar company, who were kind of the very first money in, and they were the people who ended up connecting me to the people who connected me to Tesla. And that's it's about, I think it's about saying yes, right? So when when you get invited to a conference like TED, like, yeah, it's expensive, but just find the money and say yes and go. And baby bathwater the same way. Find the money, say yes and go. And then and actually follow up with people, actually do what you say you're going to do, and that has a tendency to grow your network.
I think, Xavier, it's a really big point because when I met you, there's something about you that is so wonderfully unassuming and humble. So like some people go to conferences and they network like crazy, and I think with you show up. You know your product well, so when you actually meet the person, you're not trying in the room to go. You're not trying to force it, but when you meet the right person, you're present, you're available. You're a master on the subject, but you don't act like a master on the subject. You're very, very humble. But then you show up and you follow up. And that leads to great things over time. I mean, that's kind of how we started. We did not have the intent of let's go on this adventure together. It was the most unassuming conversation that turns into something. So you're an incredible consensus builder. I still, when you say $200 million, it blows. I mean, you got I don't know many startups that have raised $200 million from corporate giants the way ZOLA did. So that really, but it makes sense as I know you, that totally makes sense that you'd be the one to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's important. I think one thing I learned over time was like, don't oversell and don't overreach and don't be overeager, because that's actually a negative signal, right?
Definitely.
And so what you actually want to do is you want to be clear and you want to be confident and you want to actually know that you have a good thing going.
Yeah. And
so you can meet people on an even playing field.
Yeah.
And you can meet them as humans, and you can, what I found with ZOLA and actually with Better World Books too is that a lot of people want to be part of a good thing in the world. And investors are just like employees. Like, they want to be part of a good thing in the world. They want to say they were there first and wrote the first check into something that changed the world, right? What could be bigger as an investor than that? As an employee, you want to say, well, hey, I might not have a great idea to start something, but if this sounds cool, go live in Africa and help bring solar to people. Like, wow, what an amazing opportunity.
What's it take though? Because it seems like I'm actually finishing right now John Mackey's latest book, and he talks about a lot of times people come out like, you have skeptical investors, like they're, especially if you go to like large corporations, like that's no easy thing. So it sounds like you're connecting with their humanity, but obviously these are very fiscally disciplined people. So I imagine you're probably selling both. If they don't believe in the financial metrics of it, they may like you, but like, how do you navigate that where it's like, obviously they have to believe in it financially? Or is that not necessarily true? Or
Well,
what do you
no,
find?
I think what early stage is so different than late stage,
Yeah.
right? So when you have a late stage business, you're growing very slowly, right? So you're saying, okay, well, my profitability is X, and next year I'm going to grow 10 or 15%. My profitability will be X plus 15%. And then someone can build a model and they can figure out about how much that business is worth pretty easily.
Yeah.
When you have a startup, it's actually different, right? What matters is unit economics. And so what matters is that I can point to one African household and I can say it costs me X to get them as a customer and set them up. And in our case, we had to fund the cost of the solar system up front,
Right.
and then they pay me Y. And that's good economics if I can do that again and again enough times. And guess what? If I can also get to scale, then the cost of my solar stuff goes way down, because now I can procure it in bulk. I can get a manufacturer to build it for me at scale. And I can also add additional services. I can also, once someone gets a little electricity, they actually want more. So they want a more powerful system that can
Right.
power TV or a refrigerator,
Right.
right? And so that's the kind of story that an early stage investor has to believe, and they have to believe in the team. And so
The team is so important. You assembling the right team, right?
yeah, so that's really important, is that the team is credible for the job at hand,
Yeah.
right? So what's the job at hand in this business? Well, you have to navigate Africa, right? You have to understand how to build sales and distribution networks there. You have to build
Incredible.
hardware, right?
Yeah,
You have to engineer. Our system was, you can kind of picture it as like a miniature Tesla Powerwall that was plug and play. So our big design push was that this system needs to be installable by a non-technical person and be non-dangerous, so that any person, even if they stuck a fork in it, would not be injured.
Right.
And so that design had to be carried through to mass production.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And then you just said about motivating employees. It's also about motivating your team, because it's the employees, but it's also a team. I noticed yesterday, I was actually reading your latest deck, which we'll talk about in a bit. But every person, you've already fragmented, I think, into 5 different divisions.
Yeah.
And I was reading the bio on every single team leader that you put, and I'm like, how the heck do you put such incredibly competent, capable, experienced people together? And you're bringing them into these new startups. I mean, they could be doing other things, probably making more money at a flat salary. And you seem to have a knack of bringing in these people that, like, 25 year, here you are starting to roll ISP, and you've got somebody with 25 years experience, at a mass institutional level coming to run an ISP for you. Is that what you're talking about? Is that vision, or what is that to bring a team in?
Yeah, I think it's understanding human motivation,
Yeah.
right? And understanding what people actually want, and then sort of playing that back to them, right? I can never promise, I've actually never been in a position where I could woo people solely with money.
Yeah.
If I'm Goldman Sachs, that's my value proposition. We're going to work you like crazy. You might hate your clients. You might completely disagree with their values, but God, are you going to make a lot of money?
Right.
And
Right.
and I never had that. So my proposition usually was, I will pay you less, right? But here's the benefits, and here's, so what are the benefits? Number one, working with an enlightened team, working with a really, really, really good team. Number two, having an opportunity to grow. And number three, having a piece of the upside. And so
That's a big one.
right. So they have to see how this is going to meet their, especially, with what I'm doing today, they have to see how that's going to meet their personal financial goals, in addition to the sort of softer goals of working with the people they like and respect. And the other great gift is autonomy. So few companies give real autonomy to people to go do what they're good at.
Yeah.
And it's too hard because the leader won't be able to let go of control. And it's a real discipline to give people total autonomy with a framework.
Amazing.
So it's not autonomy with no checks and balances and no restraints.
Right.
It's autonomy within a framework. And
can you give me an example of autonomy? Like, can you give me one real world example of, like, what does autonomy look like when you say that?
So autonomy, one of the CEOs of our companies today recently asked me, like, what do you think? Should I hire this person? And my response was, I don't know. That's your call.
Right.
Like, I'm not running the company.
Right.
And so when some people, depends where they've worked, are very used to, having to check every little thing up the chain
Right.
and get 4 signatures on it.
Right.
And so autonomy means, saying, what's best, and then actually delivering on that the first time they ask you a question. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I spend this? Should I spend that?
Your call.
Right. You've got a budget. You've got a bank account. You tell me.
So then really what I'm hearing you say, Xavier, is that really from as a CEO of a lot of these companies that you've done, your job is to really recruit the team, light the mission up, share the mission, but really hold the container of a framework. But within the framework, let go and trust that your team and their employees that they are hiring are going to execute the framework. Am I saying that right?
That's really well said. And I would say trust but verify. Right.
Okay.
And so that's
you're still creating the goals, that the high level goals of company revenue goals or what have you. You're still ultimately in charge of that as the CEO.
Yeah.
But then light framework, trust your team to execute, and then gentle nudges when necessary.
Well, so the verify part is important, right? And usually the key question is actually just show me, right? So I'm not a great electrical engineer. I don't know how to lay out a circuit board, but how is our electrical engineering team on schedule or not? Show me.
Right.
Do we have a circuit board that works? If not, when will we have that?
Right.
And how many revisions of a circuit board will we need before we hit the final product? And let me just go talk to the engineers and make sure that they also believe that's the case. Yeah. Engineers are often really honest about these things. And so, it's that verification, right, is the art of it.
Okay.
Because if you trust without verifying, that's where you hear all sorts of stories about, people getting screwed or employees stealing money or God knows what.
Right.
So everyone can talk a good story when they come into your organization. And the question is whether they deliver or not. And the key is giving them the specific thing that they're responsible for. And then the thing they need to deliver on. And making sure that's happening. Don't wait till the end. Don't wait till, oh crap, we didn't actually ship our product.
Right.
You have to check, you have to verify in the middle.
As a leader, if you're verifying and you're seeing that person's either getting behind, not succeeding, whether it's personal or just it's not happening, you seem like a very conscious, powerful leader, but you seem to have a soft touch about you. But obviously, you're in trust. You're a fiduciary to a lot of people's money and that thing. So how do you lead in that way when you see something's like maybe not going the way you think it should be going?
I'm actually surprisingly quick to fire for being a really kind and conscientious person, because I think that's actually what I'm always trying to figure out. This was an Andy Grove thing where old CEO of Intel, where he'd said, if you hold a gun to my head and ask me to play the violin, I can't play the violin.
Right.
Right. I just don't know how to play the violin. And when you look at motivation, you have to say, does the person know how to play the violin, or and they just not want to?
Right.
In that case, we may have a motivation issue to solve. Or does the person just not know how to play the violin? Which is
I love that.
By far the more common scenario, to be honest.
Yeah.
So you might find somebody really smart and young and ambitious, and you go put them in charge of sales, and they're working as hard as they can. They're working 80 hours a week. They're just calling people. And what you realize is they don't know how to play that violin. They don't know what the job is to run a sales organization. They may actually have been a good salesperson. Usually people who are good salespeople don't know how to run sales organizations and get bored really quickly with the job of, because they have to set up a good CRM system. They have to set up a pipeline tracker for their sales. And so I think that's...
You need a good introvert and a good extrovert, a detail person and a big personality person who can connect with humans, which isn't always the same person.
Right. So I don't mean to say that the first time someone slips, you go straight to firing, but I mean to say that my job in the first 3 to 6 months with an employee is to figure out if they can play the violin. And I need to see tangible results, not just a nice presentation or a nice... Because there's lots of... I would say the greatest risk actually comes from people with backgrounds in big corporations, because those are bureaucracies where you can succeed just by managing up really well and sometimes managing down really well, sometimes not. But if you manage up really well, that's actually the most important thing.
Relationship with your boss or your boss's boss or what have you.
Right. And in everything I've built, the result is the most important thing. And we have to be, and look, sometimes people are the right person in the wrong position. That absolutely happens, especially with less experienced management teams.
Yeah.
They'll put a great person, they'll usually elevate them too high is usually what happens.
Yeah. I did notice, Xavier, when I was in Africa at ZOLA, your office there, because you mentioned all these different things to keep the team together, structure, management, autonomy, but mission, which I know is part of it. But I noticed that when I walked into ZOLA, there was photographs everywhere of customers. You can actually see from the front reception desk a light bulb in a rural family's home and this child looking up. It was a very emotionally connecting picture, directly, like you couldn't miss the mission from the minute you walked into the entrance. It was all over your offices, the impact of the power and what it was doing for families. Was that coincidence, or was that partly how you set things up?
No, it was very intentional. And it was intentional because it's just as motivating for an urban African working at the office doing marketing or whatever as it is for any American who'll come over. It's motivating for every human to see other humans have their life be better. And the truth is that most of running a mission-oriented business is boring business stuff. It's supply chains and purchase orders and marketing campaigns and sales team meetings, and it's hard to stay really connected to the mission. If I had just been going as CEO and doing one installation a day of our customers, I would never have gotten tired of our mission. I would have been so connected to our mission.
Yes.
But that would not have been an optimal use of my time. And so you get more and more disconnected from the mission as you get out of the front lines of actually delivering it.
I feel that way at Thrive sometimes. I feel like sometimes I'm still in my ivory tower. I was actually thinking last night about maybe it's time to take my staff out to an apartment and actually through the nonprofit, we've had several activities, and I realized I don't think I engage my staff enough. So I appreciate even kind of hearing about that. It's true. It becomes very it's very easy to start. Business isn't on the day-to-day isn't necessarily interesting to make the engine run. So you need that fuel on the mission, I would say, for sure.
No, I found it really affected my own psychology.
Yeah.
As the business became bigger and more complex, and I started to enjoy my job less.
Yeah.
Because I was both disconnected from the fun startup phase where we're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what works. And I was also disconnected from the customer, where, even if I got out to the customer, it was clear the team had carefully arranged for me to meet the one charismatic customer.
Right. Like a good politician.
Yeah, exactly.
Kiss the baby.
Yeah, I was like, I want to meet the customer who hates our service. I could never get them to take me to the house.
So how'd you cure that?
There's no, you can cure it with a little bit of hustle, but you kind of have to, do unexpected things. Like I always like CEOs who will go to the call center and take calls.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a fun one to do. I couldn't do it because my Swahili wasn't good enough, but I would go stand in there for a while next to people and be like, hey, what was their issue? And really, like, I also tell people, like, I always work in the medium, like whatever the medium of your business is, if your medium is watercolors, like get out a watercolor set and start painting, and so what is the medium of our business? Like in the solar business, the medium of our business is our customer's home.
Yeah.
Right. And so making sure that everyone has time to be in customer homes and to talk to the customers and to experience their little annoyances with the system, that those memories and those experiences will stick with you. And years later, you'll have a discussion and be like, remember when we were out at that customer's house and they were really annoyed because the lights switched off at this time when the batteries were low, and let's put a bigger battery pack in the system.
Do you think it's important for like your staff that like accountants or people that maybe aren't necessarily, they're just part of the critical part of the engine, but maybe don't need to be? Do you still think like the whole team needs to kind of paint in that medium, or just the CEO?
They do. I think everybody needs to, because the accountants also want to feel like they're part of a bigger picture, right?
Right.
And there's nothing worse than a disgruntled accountant.
Yes.
Because they won't flag something that they really ought to flag.
Right.
An employee might be stealing from the company or putting bad expense reports in or something like that. And we need them to realize, hey, my mission is to serve our customers and get them light.
Yeah.
And anything that stands in the way of that can't stand.
Well, you and I did a 3-hour journey, or 2 or 3 hour, on a very suburban rural spot, passing drafts. I'll never forget it. And we went to a customer's house, and house is a loose term. I'll never forget the experience. The fact that the CEO of the company is there, and like we looked, and they actually they went through. So it's exactly what you're saying. They went through how their life had changed since they could charge a cell phone, have one light outside for security, which you never think about, how one light outside on one panel, and like one light inside, and then a couple DC things that worked. And you could have told me in a brochure, you could have explained the story to me, but until we went out there and actually spoke to your customer, I would have never really fully understood it. So I understand what you're saying.
You know, we, just to take that to its logical extreme, we have taken 3 senators and 14 Congress people to our customers.
Wow.
And also the British head of, essentially the British head of aid to our customers. And so we are directly responsible for getting people motivated enough and having that same experience you did to pass the Power Africa bill, which has put billions of dollars into this sort of thing.
Incredible.
And there was another bill in the UK called Energize Africa that was similar. And I remember having a guy walk up to me at an industry event one time, was like, "You got the British over the line."
Wow.
It's like, yeah, because he just sent him to the house. And once they see that, they're like, "Oh my God, this is the future." Like, people getting energy in the middle of nowhere. They're paying with their mobile phone. Like, more of this, please.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Okay, so I want to ask you one more thing, because I could go on for an hour with you. In fact, maybe we might even have a second episode. But since we need to get going to Slovenia today, we'll wrap this up. I'm really, obviously now I really want to dive in deeper to Enduring Ventures. So after Africa, which alone could be an amazing career for just one person to achieve, but that still wasn't enough for you.
Yeah.
So now you're working on Enduring Ventures. Well, more than working, you're 4 years into it. I'm an investor in it, fully believe in what you're doing. I'm having the best time watching you do this. And instead of going granularly into it, I think I'm going to go into one that interests me the most. I'll just kind of like, tell me if I'm describing this well, and then I want to go into actually EcoSafi with you, because that one really has me interested. But you basically said, okay, the market right now, a lot of equities are overpriced. So you're going to identify the market. Equities are overpriced in everything. Stocks, you've just seen it everywhere.
Yep.
So you decide you're going to pick some really basic and tackling businesses, construction businesses, roofing businesses, pull services, and you decide, I'm going to get into this gritty businesses, roll up, find companies that have been doing great for 20, 25 years. Maybe they're getting towards retirement. Roll up great cash flow, predictable businesses that aren't necessarily sexy. Bring them all together under one roof. Optimize them through either technology, new social SEO platforms, or what have you. Bring in, again, a great staff, which I'm starting to see thematically about bringing in the right team, and then taking it to the next level. And then instead of just selling them, which a lot of American entrepreneurs would do, let's just take it, roll it up, polish it, flip that house, flip that business. You're saying, no, let's not do that. Let's look at the Warren, let's look at the Berkshire Hathaway model, and keep cash flow is so precious. Let's keep these businesses, turn them into the best businesses they can be as far as operations. Then let's put the social impact wrapper on top of it, whether it's how we treat these people, B Corps. Now you have 3 different businesses around climate tech. So once again, here you are taking pull services, roofing businesses, boring cash flow businesses, and you're rolling it into something huge, interesting, and of course with social impact. Did I describe that well, Xavier?
That's a decent description of Enduring Ventures. That is a free-flowing and beautiful description.
Do you want to add anything before I go into something?
So I would just say an important phrase is we're a long-term holding company. Yeah. So our goal is to be a holding company of a diverse range of cash flow positive businesses, and that we aim to hold forever, and aim to in doing so, create sustainable jobs, have employee participation in the upside. Again, create places where great CEOs can build whatever business they see fit under that umbrella.
Yeah.
And really our arbitrage is just patience. Yeah. It's going where.
I love that, but I gotta take a minute on that one, because that's not a very thing you hear in American culture or within American businesses. Patience, long-term vision, long-term wealth versus fix and flip and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. So Warren Buffett said nobody wants to get rich slow. And I think it's one of the most important lessons in American business that almost no one has paid attention to.
Yeah.
And
That's super interesting to me, by the way. Even when you're describing, again, as an investor, describing the model, it's like I notice my own impatience of saying, hey, where's the quarterly cash flow, as opposed to, you don't talk in terms of quarterly cash flow. You talk in terms of long-term sustainability and wealth by creating these companies that just become engines, beautiful and long-term engines, because they were built correctly from the beginning, and there are services that people are going to need for the long term.
yeah, there's a great simple example from the history of Berkshire Hathaway. So they bought See's Candies, which many people have seen, in airports,
One of
whatever.
my favorite
Yeah.
spots as a kid.
They bought it for $25 million. They actually stretched a little bit on the price at the time, above what they normally like to pay. The business has contributed $525 million back into Berkshire's coffers, which is invested in a wide range of businesses, and they still own 100% of the business.
Incredible.
And so that's an example of a cash flow positive business with a good management team just being left alone.
Yeah.
And I think
it probably would have been easy 3 years out to, when they expanded from 3 stores to 30 stores, they could have sold that and still made, at the moment, it could have felt really good, but they didn't do that.
Oh yeah, no, the pox on capitalism is IRR. It's internal rate of return.
Right.
It's a well-intentioned metric. But what it incentivizes is I need to sell this thing as soon as possible for as much as possible.
Which is very venture capital.
Yeah.
10x. I know when we were in Croatia, we had one of the leading venture capitalists saying, everything's about, if it's not 50x, it's not sexy to us. But that's not organically how most businesses grow. So you're almost you're throwing artificial accelerants to get to places so that you can get to that exit.
Yeah, you really are. And it's a very stressful experience for everyone involved. And it's honestly very stressful to run a private equity backed company, because the private equity model is, we need a 3x.
Right.
And we're going to sell your business in 5 years. And so everyone there is a mercenary. Everyone's saying, okay, I get my big payday if private equity can sell this business in 3 years.
Right.
And by telling your CEO, we're never going to sell this business, it's amazing the changes in behavior. Right. And making them an equity owner in something that's never going to be sold.
Yes.
Well, wow, I got to make sure, I got to protect the downside. Right. I got to make sure above all else, this business doesn't fail. I actually got to be conservative in my decisions.
Totally different than a venture capital.
And so I've never once put a growth target on one of our companies. Said you need to grow 20% or 30%. You tell me what the business can grow.
Yeah.
You tell me what you think your team can do.
Yeah.
You tell me, sometimes the market's good, sometimes the market's not good. You tell me.
Yeah. Once again, I see you relying back to your team and autonomy. Exactly. Yeah. You actually, as you break each one of these down, I see a familiar structure on how you lead it and how you grow them.
Yeah. No, I tweeted this recently, that my greatest skill as an executive is that I abhor power. Yeah. So I actually want as much autonomy as possible, as close to the customer as possible. That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't make a good decision on a plumbing company or a rural broadband company if I tried. I'm not close enough to that customer.
Right.
And for me to get close enough to that customer, that would be my only job.
Right.
I would be running that plumbing business. Then I could get close enough to that customer. But if my goal is not to run the plumbing business, my goal is to have ownership in a diversified pool of cash flowing businesses, then I need to find someone who is going to be that close to the customer and give them as much power as possible.
Yeah.
But then give them a container. And so one of the other things Buffett does is they sweep all the cash. So they say, you know what? All you have to do, Buffett sometimes won't even talk to his CEOs for a year or more.
Yeah.
It's calls it management by negligence, but so he takes it to an extreme. But he jokes about it, but he only does that once he trusts them. And so once he trusts them to be responsible stewards, he says, just send me the financials and send me the cash, and you do the rest. Incredible. You figure out the compensation scheme, and the only thing he figures out is how the CEO gets paid, and then CEO figures out how everyone else gets paid.
It's leadership. Again, I'm just recently got a chance to meet John Mackey, which was an incredible experience for me to spend some time with him. And again, the book I'm reading, it's leadership. It's almost like it's not intuitive the way most CEOs run. But what you're describing is really kind of a new form of leadership. Not even a new form. It's actually been around. It's just, it's not what you think of as the average way that companies are run. And it seems to be an incredibly powerful way, incredibly successful way, but maybe counterintuitive at times.
It's very counterintuitive. We even have to sometimes push decentralization into our companies.
Right.
So we have to remind them, guys, you don't want to centralize all these functions because then people will lose autonomy. So
Yes.
how can you decentralize more?
Yes. Okay, right on the bin here. So can we talk about EcoSafi for a minute?
EcoSafi.
I saw what is it?
EcoSafi.
EcoSafi, because this one is just interesting. I know it's just a little piece of Enduring Ventures, but I think it's a super cool technology.
I think it will be more valuable potentially than the rest of our businesses combined. So I'm very bullish on it.
Yes.
But you know, it's an early stage company. So this is a good example of you know, when I started Enduring Ventures, I loved everything about the model. I thought this is going to work great. And what I wasn't clear on was how do I take all my skills and experience from working in Africa and working in energy, and now I'm buying cash flowing businesses in the US. So I have to kind of throw that experience away. It was how I thought about it initially.
Interesting.
And then what I realized was, oh my God, we have cash flow here that we can invest in anything we want.
Mm.
And so we have to be responsible about it. But for you know, a pretty small investment in the grand scheme of things.
So from pools and roofs, take the cash flow from the pools, the roofers, the maintenance companies, the plumbers, and now
we do carbon negative cooking for Africa.
Wow.
So we take a fundamentally the basic idea of EcoSafi is take agricultural wastes, of which there are many, things like sugar cane and rice husks and you name it. There's actually tons of trapped energy in that agricultural waste. So any woody biomass, as anyone who's ever lit a fire knows, has a lot of energy in it. And if you can take that and you can turn it into little pellets and you put it in the right kind of stove, it actually can cook as a gas flame. So it doesn't cook like burning a fire. It cooks as a clean gas flame that looks just like a propane flame. And so by doing this, you solve the other big energy problem in Africa, frankly, bigger than electricity, which is how do people cook their food sustainably?
Mm-hmm.
So how do they, because right now, the only way they can cook their food is unsustainably.
Right.
Either they can import propane. If they're wealthier, they have propane cylinders. Like if you have a gas grill, that's what they use at their house. Nobody has natural gas to their house. So everybody has to do their own off-grid thing.
Yes.
So they take propane cylinders imported from Qatar or somewhere else. Huge drain on the economy. India spends $6 billion a year subsidizing propane.
Wow.
As a way for its population to cook. Or you can use illegal charcoal, which is produced by cutting down trees, often in unprotected forests when no one's looking.
Yeah.
Smoldering them in the ground, and then you have a bag of charcoal, and you can sell that into the city, and people can cook with it. So two spectacularly unsustainable options. EcoSafi went from it actually built on 10 years of work by another great entrepreneur who was too early, which often happens.
Yeah.
So right idea, too early. Again, maybe not the right team, I don't know, but for a variety of reasons that failed. And his number two that called me up and said, hey, I know you founded ZOLA. Like, we finally got it. Like after 10 years, like we figured out the model. We figured out all the parts of it. It's working. People are cooking with it. And the business failed because it took on tons of debt in the meantime to get to that point and collapsed. And he was like, I really don't want, I really don't want this idea to go down as a failure, because it's not a failure. It's actually the solution if you do it right. And so he and I went down the rabbit hole down to the level of how many BTUs are available to different cooking solutions, and determined that this was definitely by 2 or 3x the cheapest way for people to cook.
Incredible. So you're solving, once again, I see Xavier, the framework.
Right.
Practical, big audience, a lot of customers, big problem.
Yep.
But again, cooking, this is like pretty basic stuff here.
Pretty basic stuff. And again, informed by the values, right? So I want to see a sustainable green Africa.
Yeah.
And this business, I can really clearly map to, this takes something that was waste and it uses it for a useful function. And it requires a business to be built that will actually transform it. And so, the guy who called me up, I said, look, I believe in this, but I can't be CEO of it, but you could be CEO of it and I will help you.
Yes.
And so we've had a beautiful relationship where I'm the chairman of the company and he's the CEO. And, we talk every week about this or that because I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah. You also didn't mention indoor health when you're breathing in the propane or the kerosene and you're indoors in a lot of these second and third world countries, how negatively it helps you to be breathing that stuff in versus breathing in clean fuel. So it's an environmental play,
Yeah.
but it's a massive health play as well.
It's actually the second biggest killer after malaria is poor indoor air quality.
I did not realize it was that bad. Which we don't even mention it because we think of it as an environmental thing. It's pretty basic.
It's pretty basic. Yeah. So it is this incredible improvement of humanity triple play. Like, I also think of it as universal basic income in Africa, because if I can cut people's cooking costs in half, that is money that families will naturally spend to send their kids to school. They'll spend it on higher quality foods. It's very fundamental.
Amazing. Okay, we've gone long in a good way because I think this might be 2 episodes because I'm having so much fun with you. I do want to ask you 2 final questions.
Okay.
One, what's your like? We've been talking a lot on this trip of ours about legacy and your why.
Yeah.
Can you look back 5, 10, or even 20 years from now, like not just what you would tell your kids, but to yourself? Like what would this all look like to you beyond obviously generating wealth for investors, for your family? What other points of legacy to you personally do you see from some of these things?
I think that, I hope what people will see is some examples of how one person can make a difference, right? And it sounds a little cheesy, but like, if more people took their entrepreneurial skills and instead of building the next corporate calendar app, they took that same amount of energy and skill and network and went and built something that would fundamentally make people's lives better. If enough people did that, I think that would really get us to a lot of the solutions we need a lot quicker. And I think you're finally starting to see that in climate. You're seeing people leaving corporates left and right, putting out their resume and say, I want to get into working on climate.
Yeah.
Because we can now see, we actually know what the solutions are. We have all the solutions mapped out to solve climate change and put a bunch of carbon back in the ground. We have the technologies. We just need people to do this at crazy scale.
Yeah.
And that requires lots of talented people, requires lots of capital. I found a why that was very unexpected for me actually relatively recently, which is the most motivating thing I've ever found, which is rewilding the planet.
Wow. That's big.
Yeah. And so I started to put a bunch of pieces together and realize that actually we take it for granted now that, well, we have some national forests and that's the only way, and we just have to protect the existing wild places. We can't actually regrow forest or grow forest in fundamentally new areas. And I think that's patently false with the technology we have today. And so there's actually lots of degraded land. There's lots of land that is really not being used for anything. We've got a whole Sahara desert, right? We've got lots and lots of land. And default assumption, you can't do anything with that.
Right.
I think technology optimist forward assumption is actually that could be thriving forest and habitat.
Right.
And we have
carbon capture sites, which is a whole other episode that we'll say.
Yes,
but yeah.
Yes, exactly.
There's both. There's both. It could be reforesting, rewilding, and it could be really helping to heal the planet at minimum.
At minimum.
Yeah.
And it's just a really damn good thing to do. We went to a ex-Yugoslav Air Force base that's been abandoned.
Yeah.
for 30 years. And it was the most beautiful green place you've ever seen with wildlife. And it was really something to see. And nature will recover. Sometimes it just needs a boost.
Yeah. Yeah. Terrific. Thank you, Xavier. This has been awesome. I also now understand like your Elon Musk fanboy, as you would say.
Yes.
Because he is someone who's actually really taken a problem that people thought couldn't be profitable and turned it into Tesla. And you're really doing the same thing. So I see the parallels there. If people want to know more about you or your story, I know you have quite a Twitter following. Can we talk about your Twitter following or how to follow you?
Yeah, so I'm the only Xavier Helgesen on the internet.
Okay.
Xavier Helgesen. So you just look that up on Twitter and you will hear all of my, I'm pretty unfiltered there about any thoughts on matters of business, of, whatever.
Yes. People can ask questions. You're basically answering. I think now you've got over 40,000 people following you, asking you questions about these kind of things that you seem to take the time to answer.
Yeah, no, I really do. Yeah. I mean, I try to share all my experience. If you go read all my old tweets, you'll see how to fire someone with care, for example. Like, what is that actual process? And I think a lot of folks follow me because it's clear I've really been in the trenches. I've had to deal with nearly every bad business situation that one can conceive of.
Yes.
And I also open source a lot of stuff, like fundraising tactics that I think previously were kept by kind of a small group of startup CEOs, or like secrets of the venture capital industry that maybe like they don't like to share publicly. Like, I'm not beholden to anyone, so I just share it. And I think it's net better that more people know this stuff.
It's terrific. Xavier, thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, your stories. I learn more about you every time we speak, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, JP. It's such an honor to be on the show.
Thank you. Off to Slovenia.
Let's do it.